Alright, so first off, welcome, I guess. I haven't made these public before, I haven't done narration over them before, so I hope that this goes well. I have a bunch more non-narrated speed paints on my Patreon, but I'm trying to push into new territory over here. Anyway, I've had this picture of Reeve bouncing around since I think June. I have a lot of feelings about Reeve. I've really loved the character since the original game. I feel like Reeve has a lot of depth and room for more depth and implications of things that we don't really talk about often enough. Even setting aside the lack of explanation for how Ketshi exists, the implication of inherent magic that dropped plot point about him being an Inspire and all that, we'll get to that. There's a lot to Reeve that's never technically directly addressed. Like, he's been playing double agent with Shinra against Shinra since before Crisis, and nobody talks about that. But he used Ketshi to help the Turks find the materia that Veld needed to save Elfe, even when the kill order was out against him, knowing what President Shinra would do if he found out. And, sure, Avalanche is on the front lines of the Crisis because Sephiroth, but Reeve is on the front lines with Shinra in a way that nobody from Avalanche, except maybe Vincent, could understand. He knows what they did to Veld when his loyalty wavered, even after 30 years of service. He knows what they did to Genesis and Angeal and Sephiroth when things went south. He still ends up turning traitor to the company again to side with Avalanche in the original game. And I feel like that's something that a lot of people don't take into account, which leads to a point that actually super bugs me. I feel like there's a tendency in the fandom, at least old guard fandom, to assume that Reeve is just a figurehead in the WRO, because it's implied that he's being funded by Rufus. But taking into account the fact that he directly stood up to Shinra on and off for years in order to save the planet, and he actually gets down on the ground in the front lines during the Deep Ground incident, I find it really unlikely. Like, following the novels and Dirge itself and other supplemental material like the OVAs and such, there's a lot of indication that Reeve is on the way to becoming an extremely benevolent dictator, but since we've never seen anything past Dirge in the timeline, that's not something that I guess we'll ever know. Anyway, tracking back to Reeve with Shinra and that dropped plot point, the original idea for Reeve is that he was supposed to be an Inspire, someone capable of breathing life into inanimate objects, which is why he doesn't have to control Ketshi constantly, but can when necessary. Instead of some kind of technological link, like the controls that the Turks use in Before Crisis, he's psychically linked to him via magic. If this were the case, and if it's going to be the case in Remake, then that totally changes the whole situation with Reeve being in Shinra in the first place and makes him, I want to say, significantly more badass. Because Shinra takes people who are naturally magic and chews them up. The science department would be all over him. Reeve would be dissected in a matter of months if he refused to comply, and a matter of years even if he did comply. So instead, he went into engineering. And he is an amazing engineer. We know that he did work on the Maka reactors. It's stated that he helped to design the city of Midgar, which is not the case. He's too young for that. But we can assume that he did work retrofitting portions of the plate. The sun lamps that light up the slums in Remake are probably Reeve's idea. We know that he did a lot of work for the city, and he's super dedicated to things like getting the train running so that people can pass from the slums up plate more easily, making sure that everyone is safe and not under threat of magical radiation all the time. He takes less than 24 hours to formulate 1, 5, and 10-year plans for the rebuild of Sector 7. 24 hours for 1/8 of the largest city in the world. So he is an excellent engineer, but being magic would get him killed by the company he works for. And if this is a plot point that they take, he's an amazing engineer who happens to be magic. Every day that he goes to work could be the one that someone, somehow, finds out and he gets black-bagged and is never heard from again. And even if the Inspire angle isn't a plot point that they take back up in Remake, Reeve has still seen what happens when a loyal company dog bites the hand that feeds it. He was around for Lazard's disappearance, the youngest person on Shinra's board of directors and one of President Shinra's own children. In fact, he saw how the president put Rufus, his actual heir, in a box for 2 years and just left him there to rot until he could be useful again. More intimately, he saw what they did to Veld, the most loyal member of the board, the man who worked for Shinra for 30 years. Through the bizarre disappearance of his partner, the intentional sabotage of their own poster child, the absolute atrocity that was the rebuilding of Nibelheim, and then had the audacity to choose the wrong side at the wrong time, and was, by all accounts, murdered for it. Reeve knows that he is one step from being killed, no matter what his background is, no matter where she came from. He knows that one wrong word or one wrong step could get him killed at any time. And he goes to work anyway. He carries on anyway. He's determined to make Midgar a better place anyway, because he's a badass. The point is, I love Reeve, and you should love Reeve. Thank you. Good night.